Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say up front to come on. Okay. Thanks, Scott. Lovely to have you here. Glad you can hear us now. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to everybody to the 2021 AGM of the Pacific Islands Roundtable meeting. We're thrilled to have you all here. I just wanted to say something. As you all know, we had some problems with daylight savings and governments in the Pacific deciding that this year they didn't want it and didn't let Microsoft know. And so Microsoft is not caught up with all of that. And poor Junie has been trying to go through that. So I know a few of you will have to leave early, but don't worry about it. As you just heard, we are recording it and we will get that to you, and we can easily follow up on any questions or information you need afterwards. So thank you very much for all of that. With that, could I ask Vi, would you mind opening today with a prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we come before you today and ask for your blessings as we embark on this 24th meeting of our roundtable for nature conservation protected areas. We ask, Lord, that you bless us and help us with our deliberations and discussions of today, so we may find ways and means to move forward with a new framework and to strengthen our collective collaboration over the next 5 years. We ask your blessings, Lord, to open our minds and our hearts as well, so that we may be able to come to common conclusions on the common objectives that we have. So we thank you, Lord, for everything. Thank you for blessing us as we move towards the end of this work week. And I ask that we bless all of the PIRT members who are with us today. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Vi. 2021 certainly had its challenges, and COVID has continued to change and move our world. But despite these challenges, we've been able to make some good progress in the Pacific Island Roundtable, and we've successfully taken the voice of the Pacific, the Vermont Declaration, to the global stage, and we will hear more from IUCN and Mason on their World Congress and how they deliberated with that. And also we thank the President of New Caledonia who presented the declaration only a few weeks ago in Glasgow. And thank you, SPC and Anne-Claire, for your support. From mid-year, we've had our first ever PIRT coordinator, wonderful James Tremlett. He's been outstanding, and I'm sure all of you have been speaking to him and harassed by him for certain aspects. So thank you, James. And it's a huge thank you to UNEP, who have been supporting us and with James's position, and we're very, very grateful. And that's helped us with the monitoring and implementation plan that we will endorse today. And we're also looking towards a youth coordinator for 2022. So we've got some exciting developments coming through for next year. Our working groups have worked hard throughout the year, sharing resources, their ideas, their capacity, and their knowledge to ensure effectiveness and greater impact for the Pacific and our nature and our framework. We'll be hearing updates from these groups today, and Amanda will also give an update on the progress that SPREP and the Secretariat has made throughout 2021. And with that, I'd love to throw to Cozy, please. We would love to have your welcome, and we're thrilled that you're here also. Thank you, Cozy.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for that, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're joining us. It's been a while since we had our last PIRT meeting, 2019, and it's good to see you all, even though we're meeting virtually. Really great to see that we're all coming together again, despite the fact that we're not able to meet face to face, and of course with the challenges with COVID. It's good to see all of you virtually. And as Margaret said, it's been almost a year since the last 10th Nature conference, and we're excited to hear where, where Brazil is heading in the next couple of years, especially in the next 5 years in terms of the new framework. And I'd like to thank everybody, partners, all of the working groups, in particular James, for the work that he's done in terms of moving the framework. As we look forward, of course, we'll be hearing from some of our partners in terms of what's been happening in the past, but 2022, I hear that some of our countries will be opening borders, so there's potential opportunity for some of these upcoming key events coming up in 2022, especially key events that are planned to happen in the region. I hope is that this will provide opportunities for us to not just to meet together, but to be able to, through PIRT, support the region and highlight, of course, the outcomes of the 10th Nature Conservation Conference, particularly the framework, and also the Vanua Declaration, which, as you all know, focuses on priorities and commitments. Many of you who have been involved in PIRT know that PIRT is a very unique entity in the sense that it's been established. It's been around for more than 20 years with a coalition of very different, various government agencies, governments, donors, community groups. I guess all have a common vision in terms of seeing and visiting a Pacific that has a healthy ocean, healthy islands, and of course, healthy people. We all know about what COVID has done in the last 2 years. It's a reminder to us in terms of how dependent we are on a healthy, resilient environment, ecosystem, and communities, and the urgent need for us to combine and work together in terms of our efforts to continue to support our countries to working back better. Finally, colleagues, as this is my last PIRT annual meeting, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your continued support to the Secretariat. I'd like to thank all of the previous PIRT chairs. I'd like to mention Mason. Mason, good to see you. For all of your support and hard work as chair over the last couple of years. We acknowledge and want to say thank you for all of the hard work that you did when you were the chair. Of course, I want to thank and acknowledge our new chair, also new, but relatively new. I want to thank and welcome Margaret, our new PIRT chair. I think she's doing a fantastic, excellent job. Thank you so much, Margaret, for your leadership. And I have no doubt that you will continue to receive the support from all of the PIRT partners, as we continue to move forward and implementing the new framework for nature conservation. So thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank my team here, particularly Stuart and Amanda, who's with you, Margaret, and Julie, and all of my colleagues that are here, and Sifa. Thank you very much to everybody for your support. And Margaret, just want to say that we will continue to support you. And Sifa, taking over from me, is listening very carefully. He has already said he is going to provide you unconditional support. So you can count on that. So colleague, listen, that's all I wanted to say. Look forward to our meeting today, and I finished by saying, please have a great Christmas break and stay safe. Thank you.
And a clap, a virtual clap. We thank you for all your hard work, and I'm sure I will find you wherever you go to to take you up on that support. Excellent, thanks, Cosy. Over to you now, Amanda, please.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm just going to share my screen because PIRT's all about people collaborating. You know, usually these are face-to-face meetings, and one of the major outcomes is that we all get to talk breaks. But although we're constrained because of being on Zoom, I'd just like to invite everyone to introduce themselves. So by using the Zoom text box, the chat box, can I ask you to just write, you know, your name should already be on your little profile thing, but if it's not, please introduce who you are. How long you've been involved in PIRT, because there's a mix of people here that have been involved from when PIRT was first established to some have just joined very recently, especially those who have joined from coming in contact with us from the Nature Conference. And then the last thing I want you to do is just use 3 words that describe your work. I'm going to leave that open-ended. It could be an idea of what sort of area you focus on, or it could be something a bit quirky or shares your passion. But yeah, 3 words that describe what you do. So can we get that happening in the chat box, just so everyone can get to know each other a little bit?
And of course, it will be recorded for everyone to then see for later on. So say nice things.
Yes. So you can do your introductions in the chat box while we continue with this meeting, but I think it's just a good way to see who's involved.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah.
If that's okay for me to continue with Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. Very hard to try and get some energy and virtual interaction, but thank you for that. And everyone going around and introducing themselves is difficult with all the problems with sound. So thank you for that innovation. James, wonderful James. I'm going to hand over to James now to present the planning framework and monitoring that you have all been working hard on with us. We're very grateful. This is a huge moment for the organisation, and we will be working tirelessly to create the work plan and develop the work plan as we go forward. So James, I'm handing over to you if that's okay.
Kia ora, Margaret, and thanks to everyone for your assistance and cooperation over the last couple of months as we've worked to develop this implementation plan. It's been quite a big body of work, and many thanks for your wisdom and guidance in response to many emails of the last few months. So as an introduction, my name's James Tremlett. I'm a consultant currently sponsored by UNEP to work with PIRT in order to develop our collective implementation and monitoring plan for this new framework for nature conservation and protected areas that got adopted at our conference late last year. I know that there's a few new people on the call who may not be so aware of the framework, and so I've been asked just to go through it very quickly and talk a little bit about the intention of the framework, a bit about its history and its key features. Apologies to everyone who sat through this many times before, but just so we're all on the same page. So the Pacific Islands Framework for Nature Conservation and Protected Areas is the key regional strategy for nature conservation. It's the latest in a whole series of frameworks, and before that, action strategies that are endorsed by all the 22 countries and territories that are members of SPREP, as well as by the PIRT member organizations. And so this collective, this roundtable, is mandated by those governments to promote, to monitor, and to report on our implementation of the framework. The framework is for any organization, community, or individual involved in nature conservation in the Pacific, and it's owned by all of those collectively. So that includes Pacific governments and agencies, includes funding organizations, intergovernmental, multilateral organizations, the NGO community, as well as private sector organizations, and most importantly, at the community level and civil society. So the purpose of the framework is to provide broad strategic guidance for conservation initiatives undertaken by all these stakeholders in the Pacific. In terms of the key features, I'll just go through this really quickly. We have these 8 principles for conservation implementation in the Pacific. So they're a code of conduct for implementing all our collective programs in Pacific contexts. And they're a guide for designing, establishing, delivering, and sustaining conservation in our region. They specify the responsibilities of different types of organizations and stakeholders. And so within the framework itself, quite a bit of detail is gone into within each one of those principles in terms of those responsibilities and obligations. There are these 6 strategic objectives for the period of the framework from 2021 to 2025. They're broad priorities for nature conservation action in the Pacific. So their purpose is to provide a coordinated strategic approach to conservation across jurisdictions. Importantly, they're not prescriptive, so decisions around goals and targets and indicators remain the responsibility of Pacific governments supported by their partners. So that's not something that the framework does. Previous action strategies did do that, but these frameworks have taken a different direction with regards to that. However, the framework does give guidance regarding the best practice or the how-to for implementing these strategic objectives. And this best practice is organized within 21 thematic action tracks that also shaped our conference last year. And so this is just an example from within the framework. Within that objective 6, for instance, there are action tracks around science and traditional knowledge, around governance, and there's another one around financing. Each of those action tracks is detailed with key challenges in the region, with an overview of best practice and with examples of key partners and programs within the region. And again, many thanks to all our PIRT members who endured many months of emails in order to finalize this wording last year. The framework also makes links really explicit to other important global frameworks, so the SDGs and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And that's something that's important in our own monitoring and reporting as a roundtable, as I'll get to, but also hopefully useful for members of the roundtable as well in your own reporting and monitoring. So as Margaret and Amanda mentioned, the Vemore Declaration was in many ways a summary of the new framework and a call to action that was adopted by the governments of Pacific Island countries and territories and a number of other governments, also by all the member organizations of the Roundtable, and has since made its way to various global forums and is continuing that journey as we speak. I believe the President of New Caledonia presented this declaration to the climate change COP in Glasgow just a few weeks ago. So that journey of the declaration continues. So in terms of our new work, the implementation and monitoring plan for the Roundtable. So over the last 6 months or so, thanks to UNEP again for allowing this to happen, we've been working on developing a plan of action for the implementation and monitoring of the regional framework by the Roundtable. So essentially, that's it looks at the collective work of the member organizations of the Roundtable and the constituent working groups of PIRT, and looks at key strands of work that we can work on together towards the implementation. It does not provide guidance on the implementation of the framework by parties external to the Roundtable. That was a decision that we made really early on, thinking that it was most important at this stage to focus on our own collaboration and on the sense of working together with a sense of unity, I suppose, as a collective of organizations working for conservation in the Pacific. So going into the implementation and monitoring plan in a bit more detail, the plan identifies 3 key strands of work for the Roundtable, and these were identified in conversation with all the member organizations of PIRT late last year following that conference. So firstly, collaboration to influence the conservation and development agenda, both internationally and within the region. Collaboration to guide and influence conservation action. That's more about, I suppose, guiding what conservation looks like on the ground and in the nitty-gritty of its implementation. And then collaboration to securing sustainable funding and financing for conservation into the future. So the plan that we've created and that you have all provided so much helpful feedback on includes details of initial planned activities for the period 2021 to 2025, the period of the framework. And I can go into this in a little bit more detail. So that first strand, collaborating to influence the conservation development agenda, really that strand is focusing on ensuring that conservation is prioritized as a foundation of sustainable economic development in the Pacific, on increasing the visibility of the Pacific in global conservation and development agenda setting, and strengthening the collective voice of PIRT, of the Roundtable, and of increasing uptake of the regional framework between the 5 yearly conferences rather than just at the conference itself. So in terms of initial activities that we've identified, and noting that these are initial activities only that we're starting to plan for now, but no doubt further activities that we decide to focus on collectively will come into play over the period of this implementation plan. So firstly, producing regular coordinated joint policy briefs or position papers corresponding to elements of the framework. So the intention there is to present a collective position from the Roundtable on key issues for nature conservation in our region, and drawing on the power of PIRT's collective voice to elevate the importance of Pacific conservation and present practical guidance for action. So these are intended to be short and accessible documents that are targeted for use by practitioners and decision makers in external stakeholder organizations. So in particular, those outside of the Roundtable. And we can target them towards particular things that are happening, particular negotiations or events as necessary. Secondly, strategically engage as a collective in discussions at regional fora with governments and regional bodies. I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but again, there's more detail within the implementation plan itself. Thirdly, facilitate targeted dialogues with non-conservation organizations and sectors. We know that there's a lot of other organizations that exert a lot of influence within the region, in particular with regards to what development looks like, and that in turn has a great influence on Pacific environments and communities. And there's a great opportunity there for further collaboration and for conversations that go both ways in terms of mutual learning about how to improve conservation outcomes that are done by other kinds of organizations. Moving on, strategically widening the PIRT membership. That's something that we will continue conversations with members about following this meeting and into next year, but it's something that's been suggested by probably a majority of member organizations. But there's some discussions to be had about and what that looks like and the criteria, I suppose, for becoming a member of PIRT and what that involves. And lastly, building capacity within the Roundtable for coordination and longevity. That's really about ensuring that there's systems internally within the Roundtable to ensure that long-term coordination continues. And Margaret mentioned securing the funding for the young professional roles to come on board next year, which is really exciting in terms of building more leadership within the Roundtable on and into the future. So our second strand there, collaborating to guide and influence conservation action. And that's focusing on increasing access to and uptake of locally appropriate best practice in Pacific conservation, on increasing collaborative conservation action on the ground by PIRT members, and on increasing the capacity of the Roundtable and our regional partners to work within the framework principles and towards those strategic objectives. And really, we've identified one specific activity, but it's a big one with a lot of detail within it relating to this strand of work, and that's about strengthening the role of the working groups in knowledge exchange and providing guidance to the wider Pacific conservation community. So the working groups, as you all know, are our key mechanism as a Roundtable for guiding and influencing conservation action. And so within this activity, we're proposing to provide support as a coordination team to help strengthen the internal communication, planning, and administration of those working groups where requested by the chairs. And there's a lot of work that can be done there to build on the fantastic work that the working groups have been doing over the last years. Strand number 3, collaboration to secure sustainable funding for conservation. And within this strand, focusing on increasing coordination between members towards accessing funding, diversifying the models of sustainable financing and fundraising that are utilized in Pacific conservation, on increasing the resourcing available for Pacific Island environmental ministries and departments where possible, and increasing the visibility of the Pacific in global conservation resourcing. So in terms of our initial activities, and I'm sure there'll be more to come within this strand of work as well, but we have a plan to facilitate regular updates from donor organizations about updating funding opportunities, about upcoming funding opportunities, sorry. And so donor organizations will be invited on a regular basis to share information about their upcoming funding opportunities with the roundtable and with the working groups as well. And then lastly, effectively monitor the work of the roundtable towards the implementation of the 2021 to 2025 regional framework. That, of course, being an important step in attracting more sustainable long-term funding for conservation in the Pacific. So the monitoring and reporting program that we've developed is intended to clearly demonstrate the value of the roundtable and of our collective work to collaborate for nature conservation action in the Pacific, but also without adding an undue reporting burden to members or working groups as well. So we're aiming to strike that balance there. So in terms of monitoring the implementation of the framework, you will have all seen hopefully the draft of the monitoring and implementation plan, and most members and working groups responded with feedback on that we've integrated into the final version. So thank you again. So that plan includes reporting templates for PIRT member organizations and for working groups. So two separate types of template regarding the implementation of the framework by those different groups. And the intention there is that these will be completed annually to provide a picture of progress by the roundtable towards the principles and strategic objectives of the framework, as well as our collaboration and coordination across the region. So in terms of reporting by PIRT members, we have an element of self-reporting organizational alignment with framework principles. And so that's, I suppose, is asking member organizations to self-assess how well they believe that they align with each of those 8 principles, and if possible, to talk about any plans that they have to improve that alignment into the future. As a note there, we're proposing that that the data received here remains anonymous, and that there'll be summaries made available for the PIRT website and also presented to the PIRT annual meeting. But in terms of that self-assessment, that will be done anonymously by organizations. PIRT members will also be asked to talk about their program alignment with the strategic objectives of the framework. So in terms of their practical regional programs, how do those programs align with each of those 6 objectives? And then again, in terms of their relationship with the roundtable, further things that they'd like to see over the coming year. And then with the working groups, we're asking questions of the working groups in terms of their membership, their engagement, some practical things about how often meetings are held, what kinds of activities, what kinds of meetings are undertaken by working groups. And then asking for further detail as well about their activities and outputs in relation to those strategic objectives. So again, an ability to measure the collaborative and collective work of the roundtable with relation to those strategic objectives. So we're proposing that this reporting takes place annually, and that in a normal year, the roundtable will be asking for this reporting to be done in the lead up to this annual meeting. And so then some analysis can be done on the data that comes back, and the meeting can be presented with a summary of what's happened over the last 12 months in terms of our collective work. We haven't done that this year because of the need to endorse this approach by this meeting and by all the members of the roundtable. But in the future, that's what's proposed to happen. And so finally, we have a work plan, a biannual work plan developed for the roundtable. This is just a snapshot of the initial page of it, but the full work plan is in that the final version of the implementation plan that you've all received. And so it's organized by those activities that I talked about, with designated responsibility for delivering those activities. And again, it's something that I'm sure will develop and become more detailed as the implementation starts to occur in the first quarter of next year. We're again proposing that this gets renewed annually, but that the planning occurs for the next 2 years, so that we have that ability as a roundtable to think a bit more strategically about how we're going to implement the framework over more of a medium term. And that's it from me. So back to you, Margaret and Amanda. Thanks again to all of you for your input, your support, and your collaboration in developing this work plan. And look forward, hopefully, to continuing to work with you all into the future. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, James. We're blessed to have you, and you've worked extremely hard, and I thank all the chairs and the PIRT members. I think this is an outstanding way forward, and we have had that meeting. It is endorsed. We'll put that on the agenda a bit further, but we can now really start to bring the framework to life. So thank you, James. We're very, very grateful for your presentation and hard work, and UNEP for helping us have that extra support and help. It's made a huge difference to that work. So I'd like to now hand over to Amanda, and Amanda's going to give us an update from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Let's try to get this laid properly.
Yeah, I just think so.
Yeah.
Hi, Margaret.
Hey.
Sorry, apologies, Amanda. We do have questions on the chat. So Sepha would like to ask a question.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you. I can't see that. So thank you so much. James, would you like to come back, appear back on the screen, please? Thank you.
Yes,
and
still here.
Yeah, thank you. And Junie, do you want to ask the questions?
I'll let Sepha, who's here, ask his question, and then I'll
Thank you.
Right, and Claire's question.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm very grateful. Thank you, Stepha.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Thank you, James. Just wanted to say that UNEP's glad to be able to help with this. When Amanda first came to me to request it, we immediately saw the need and benefit of doing it. While we didn't have any money available, we found the money to enable it to be done. And we had another discussion with you last week to see whether we can fill that gap of 3 to 6 months that that's needed to fill in before you get those resources that you said you have already.
Yes, Stepha, thank you.
And the main question for me was just with the reporting. I hope we will be tying it in with all the other reporting that everyone has to do for different things.
Yeah.
SDGs, the different NEAs, and that maybe we can even start from the implementation plan stage to identify those different things. And whoever does the monitoring plan later can pick up on it in more detail. In all the work that we've done with SPREP on indicators with the Inform project, that you can benefit from. And I think it's also important when you look at the different frameworks, that you don't only look at the PIRT, or the framework for nature conservation. The reason I say that is there's a lot of things in the Cleaner Pacific thing that we were just doing over this past 2 weeks that have relevance to the work that I saw in the implementation plan draft that James said. It's valuable to do that crossover analysis as well. And James has been helping me with the UN decade for ecosystem restoration. And I think some of that discussion we can.
Agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sefa. Yeah, all very good points. And we're looking to put a calendar together of events and reporting for next year to pick that up. Amanda may have a little more to say about that. But James, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Sefa, and echo Margaret's note about developing that calendar of key reporting obligations that organizations also have. I think that's really important. We have tried our best to make it as low a reporting burden as possible on members, noting the reporting that everyone has to do already, but also noting that there is specific information that's specific to the framework that it's important to collect. And so trying to strike that balance, I suppose, between needing to collect that particular data. In terms of crossover with other regional frameworks, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, really important, and potentially a whole nother body of work to develop those more closely. Yeah, and in particular with the connections. Yeah, in particular, as you say, with those connections with the inform indicators and weaving those into the framework. Yeah. So thank you, Sefa, again for your support and for UNEP's support. I should note to new people joining the call that this is the first time we believe that the Roundtable has been able to develop this kind of implementation plan for the framework, and that's due to the support of UNEP. So thanks again.
It's outstanding.
Just one follow-up point. I think we don't try and minimize the burden of the reporting. I think what you need to do is look at the usefulness of the reporting. I think we don't mind doing reporting if it's useful. It can be used for things that we have. You might find that if we do this one properly, then it serves our purposes. So don't make that I wouldn't believe that your driving concern to minimize the. I think if you make it useful reporting, then people don't. Don't complain what they have to do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sefa.
Yeah, agreed. Very, very well received, and we all feel the same. So thank you, Sefa, and well noted. And we will envisage to make sure that we do that as we go forward. Thank you so much. Junie, there's so many people in the chat introducing themselves. I'm not too sure where any questions are. So is there anything else, Junie, that we should be noting?
Yeah, we had a question from Anne-Claire, and she just wanted to ask why we're proposing to have the information treated confidentially.
Good question. James, over to you.
I suppose with that particular first element of that, of the reporting framework for the member organizations that we developed, where it asks organizations to self-assess their alignment with each of those code of conduct principles. I guess from our perspective, it seemed that that's quite an ask of organizations to be self-critical in that way. And that perhaps organizations might feel a bit more comfortable if that element was not to be put on the internet, essentially. But then a summary of that element will be made available to the rest of the Roundtable and to the general public. That's what we're proposing, but definitely happy for other perspectives on that. Certainly the other elements of reporting in terms of how partners or how member organizations programs align with each of those 6 strategic objectives. I think it's important that that's public. And I think that in previous years, there was some of that data collected and was made public as well. Does that answer your question, Anne-Claire?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. Yes, and congratulations for all this work. It's very well done on considering the fact that we are so many working together. It's a huge success to build this kind of framework and implementing plan. And I think that you must have advertised this success far. Not only in the Pacific region, because I have been asked by the organization of the Mediterranean Protected Areas Forum at the beginning of December to present during a session which name is engaging and monitoring progress in implementing the post-2020 Mediterranean MPA roadmap. And they have heard that we, as a PIRT, we have developed the framework and the implementation and monitoring plan. And so they asked me to present very shortly what are these tools and to be in order to use them. So I'm very happy to do that under PIRT, and so thank you for that.
Great, the voice of the Pacific being heard and helping with Mediterranean, and as we're looking to join and learn together globally and regionally and nationally, it's very exciting. So look forward to talking further with you, Anne-Claire, on that. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, no more questions. Thank you, Junie. So over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. And let me try to get this display so you can see at the top. Anyway, that heading up there that's sort of hidden from my screen this is an update on some of PIRT's progress since the Nature Conference. So I don't know if you've seen it coming up in your news reports and social media streams, but it's 1 year exactly since the 10th Pacific Islands Nature Conference. And while the year has still been bumpy with COVID and challenges, and at times we felt like, we were a bit frustrated because we wanted to keep the momentum and the energy we had from the Nature Conference and to move forward with everyone's energy that came from that. So at times we felt like we were going too slow and we were hindered. We didn't know if COVID was going to stop and what we could do. But when we reflect a year on, PIRT has actually made some big steps forward. And as you just heard, like one of the major ones is having an enhanced coordination team brought about by having UNEP's funding for James Tremlett's role as an implementation coordinator, which allowed the development of that implementation and monitoring plan. Through James, we were also able to meet with the chairs, and this was just still very initial preliminary contact with them, and 2022 is going to bring much more further enhancements and progress. But we wanted to listen to the chairs. We met with most of them to hear what they value about PIRT, what the challenges are, and how the PIRT Secretariat and Coordination Group can support them to, deliver the framework, but more about how do we in the region work together to deliver everyone's priorities, which are covered under that new framework. So there's more to come with that for next year. We had also meetings with our partners like UN. We'll be meeting with UN Environment, FAO, as well as our donors, and we want to continue this in 2022. But initial discussions happened just to say, how can we work more effectively, PIRT and our UN agencies and donors? So we've had some initial discussions on that, and we'll be carrying that forward into 2022, just to link us all closer to those agencies and donors, which benefits both sides, us and them, to deliver the global and regional priorities.
And stop duplication, we hope.
Yes, that's a huge one. Actually, and that is the aim of PIRT, isn't it? To collaborate and stop duplication. We also finally presented the second Pacific Island Environment Leadership Awards, and Stuart's going to say a bit more about this soon, and we'll also showcase the video during the break. But this was to be done face-to-face at the Nature Conference. It was postponed, but we did present it at the SPRET meeting, so Stuart will provide more details soon. As you saw in James's, the framework presentation, one of the goals is to expand the membership of PIRT to capture all those partners that we need to implement the priorities. So the Nature Conference provided a whole new set of agencies that we hadn't previously worked effectively with, from those that cover the French territories, plus even just other global and regional partners that we hadn't been engaging with. So we'll continue to move towards inviting them to be formal PIRT members or just partners if they're not eligible. And this may mean, in 2022, we're looking to be more bilingual and more inclusive by having French content on our website, potentially interpretation services for these sorts of meetings. So the new framework for nature conservation, you saw that, that was finalized for the Nature Conference with final input gathered there, but we have now published it and translated that into French and English as well, and it's now available on the PIRT website, the SPREP website, and it's also been emailed out to everybody. And that was formally endorsed by the Pacific Island countries and territories at the SPREP meeting in September this year. So another big achievement to have that finalized. And then finally, the Vamore Declaration and the framework, and like Anne-Claire was saying, there's no point us just having these things sitting in our own agencies. We want to communicate the Pacific priorities at regional and global events, which will then in turn help showcase what these priorities are, but also can drive donor funding back to the region aligned to implementing the framework. So that's a quick update of the 1 year since the Nature Conference. And yeah, we're excited to keep going in 2022. So momentum's just continuing to build. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, it's been a very busy year if we look back. You never do as much as we really want to, but I think we've done, and the officers have done an outstanding job. So Amanda, you're now going to, on that last point, go into a global update, and some of our partners are going to also join us to give us an update on what has been going on around the globe for us. Thank you.
Margaret. So as we said, I think it's like to the day, a year ago, the Vamore Declaration was signed.
Gone into your slide.
Hit it again.
There we go.
Was signed as part of the high-level segment at the 10th Pacific Island Nature Conference, and was signed by countries and our PIRT heads of organisation. So since then, we said, like I was saying, having this document just sitting on a website or whatever, that's not the goal of it. The goal was to then take it as the Pacific's message across the world and regionally, and get it as much attention as we could. So in this 1 year on, like we said, COVID set challenges, but we have had some successes in getting this into the being captured in other documents and events. So we'll just go through a few of these of where PIRT members, like it's not just the Secretariat and the Chair's jobs to get this to these high-level meetings, but other members played a key role in promoting this. And this will continue, for the next 5 years. We can use this as the voice of the Pacific. So the Vamore Declaration, it went to the SPREP high-level meeting, which was focused on marine litter and plastic pollution. And they developed a Pacific Regional Declaration, and the Vamore Declaration featured in that and was mentioned. It then went to the 5th France Ocean Summit, which was held in July, and it was co-chaired by Macron, President of France, and also the Prime Minister Tuvalu. And they covered a range of topics, including, relevant to us was the ocean, its resources, climate change and biodiversity. And the Vamore Declaration was captured in that event's final summit document. IUCN World Conservation Congress, we're going to throw to Mason and his team in a second just to provide some key outcomes from this event. But PIRT, the framework and the declaration were showcased at this event. And I will hand over to Mason. Do you want to say a few words now, Mason, about that? See if Mason or Ken or one of the IUCN team would like to take the floor now. Otherwise, we can jump back later.
Hi, all. I can I'm not sure if Mason's there, but I can say a few things unless Mason would like to.
Hi, Ken. He was. I don't know.
Great to see you, Ken. Yes, if you don't mind starting, that would be wonderful.
I can start. I've got a few minutes before I have to pop out.
Thank you.
I've got a little presentation that I can give if I can share my screen.
Just get you permission, Ken.
One of the few people that made it across the ocean to the meetings. Well done.
Let me see if I remember how to do this. It's actually been a while since I've done it. So which screen can you see?
You need to hit your slideshow. We can see you, but you just need to hit your slideshow. Thank you.
You got it?
Yes, we have your notes as well, but that's okay. No notes. Okay, thank you.
All right. So yeah, unfortunately, the team from Oro was unable to most of the team from Oro was unable to travel across to Marseille. There were some visa glitches here in Fiji.
Ken, your audio is very low, just so you know.
Okay, I'll try to speak up.
Yeah, and also I presume I'm not being, we've only got a few minutes for this. So if you, I see there's 35 slides, that's all.
I'll go through them fast. A lot of them are
just a few would be lovely. Thank you so much.
Some of them are my holiday photos. So there were only a few of us. So it was only me that could go from Oro. So I'll just quickly go through the Congress overview and the outcomes, the Marseille Manifesto, and a little bit of the motions, and a few highlights from the Oceania Hawaii Pavilion. So you guys know the details of the Congress. There were more than 1,000 people there. It was really well attended. We had the exhibition and the members assembly, as well as some council meetings. So the main outcome was the Marseille Manifesto, which you can find online, and which dovetails very nicely with the Venmore Declaration. So it discusses respecting and harnessing perspective and agency of all global citizens. It looks for collaboration and partnerships, and sees local action. It then talks about the COVID-19 impacts. So there's a lot in there. And then it goes on to talk about biodiversity in the post-2020 biodiversity framework, with a real emphasis on species, ecosystems, and protected areas in terms of site-based conservation. And then it does also mention the climate emergency. In terms of the motions that were passed at Congress, so there were motions that were voted on prior to the Congress, and then there were 19 or so that were voted on at Congress. So this slide shows the 19 that were voted on and all passed at the Congress. The ones in blue are really kind of relevant to the Pacific. So motion 3 of establishing a climate change commission passed. There were motions on oceans, planning maritime areas, the peaceful and quiet ocean passed, and then motion 69 on the moratorium on seabed mining also passed. The ones in green here are relevant to Indigenous peoples, which are also quite relevant to the Pacific. The ones that were co-sponsored by Oceania members, so we had a bunch from Australia. The ones in red here, the motion numbers in red, were voted on during the Congress. So, see them there. This is the last of the ones from Australia. We had a few that were voted on from New Zealand, 48 and 126. And then a handful from our Pacific Island country members. But these were all voted prior to Congress. And then just to show you the Climate Change Commission motion was approved overwhelmingly, as well as motion 69 for the deep seabed mining moratorium. Also at the Congress, we got a new president, Razan Al-Mubarak from UAE. And it's quite exciting because she's a marine biologist at heart and does a lot of work with turtles. So I think that's also great for the Pacific. And then we had our 3 council members elected. Peter Cochrane from Australia was re-elected. Lolita Gibbons from the Palau Conservation Society was elected as our Pacific council member, and Catherine Yorns from New Zealand was elected. Then we had the Oceania Hawaii Pavilion, which continued our cooperation with Hawaii from the last Congress. The Hawaiians had a really big delegation, and then I was there off the side representing Oceania in the Oro office. We had a really busy agenda. The pink items here were Hawaii. The yellow ones were from Oceania. So we talked about the PIRT in the pavilion opening, and then we also had a PIRT session where I delivered Margaret's presentation as the very last presentation. We presented the Benmore Declaration there. We had a bunch of sessions, the yellow ones from Oceania, from the Oro program, and that included Palau Conservation Society and the PIRT, as well as a really well-attended session on Kiwa, and then the Environmental Law Roundtable dialogue on the second to last day. So just a few holiday pictures. So this was the traditional masked Hawaiian opening ceremony. We had a presentation, a live presentation from Governor Ige, and a lot of people attended. As you can see, everybody was masked throughout the Congress, and we were all swab tested every 3 days. Mason also gave a presentation at the opening. Peter Thompson, Ambassador Thompson was there and stopped by the pavilion. Then we had, from the Pacific, we also had the Permanent Secretary for Environment from Fiji. This is him presenting at a deep sea mining pavilion event. And we had Lolita Gibbons from Palau, representing the Kiwa event. This was the AFD presenter. We had a presentation from Wallace and from SPC. And then just a couple of last ones. We did all of the presentations hybrid. So we had people from Fiji or other parts of the world logging on. And so we did hybrid presentations. This is Maria Morvesi presenting at the law conference session, and the incoming World Commission on Environmental Law, Professor Christina Voigt. She dashed over from being elected. This was her first event as chair of WCEL. And then this is the 3 of us from the Pacific having dinner down by the port with PS Environment, Joshua Wycliffe, and Lolita from Palau. thank you, and sorry for taking so long.
Thank you, Ken. No, that's great, and great to see that the declaration was put forward in the PIRT angle to it. So thank you so much, Ken. We're very, very grateful, and it sounds like you had a very successful meeting. We'd like to now go to Sefa, please, for the UN COP26.
Oh, no.
No, I'm lying to you.
Yeah,
Amanda?
good, you're good. Got it. So another highlight of where the Vamore Declaration was voiced was we thank New Caledonia government for making this a priority. But the president of New Caledonia highlighted the declaration during the meetings at COP26 just last month. So that's showing it is getting out there. There are also a couple of other SPREP partners, we're attending COP26. So we're going to email around some updates from them. And that includes Alfred from WWF was there with the Fiji delegation. He's provided some nice summary points and a video that we can share via email. And also SPREP will get an update on, what does COP26 mean for biodiversity and the region. So, that was 2021 of where the Pacific had a voice and where the Vamore Declaration went, and essentially where PIRT was showcased then. But what's next for 2022? So on the screen is just a few events that we've identified at this stage. We've still got COVID uncertainties, but that's what we know. Some PIRT members are already saying they're attending. If you have some other events, please either send them through on the chat or email us and let us know that they're priorities for the region and that your agency will be attending, and we'd love to work with you to get PIRT and Pacific's messages showcased at those events. So one of those things that we'd like to, we said we want to investigate for 2022 is opportunities to strengthen PIRT's work with our UN partners and other donors. So I'd actually like to invite Sefa to make some remarks on that, of where he sees PIRT being able to collaborate more strongly with these agencies and donors. Would be happy enough to take the floor right now.
You had to take a call.
No worries, thanks. We just got a message through that Sefa just had to pop out, but he'll be back shortly. So in the meantime, let's just see what we have next. So we can jump back to Sefa at any stage.
Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is for the awards for Stuart.
Yeah, actually, so we might try. It would be good to get Sefa to speak.
He could come on
before
later.
we go to
That's
the
fine.
awards. Actually, while while we have one spare second, I might just mention there was one event there in 2022, which it was the Impact 5, which is the International Marine Protected Areas Conference. The first conference was held in Australia, I believe. But anyway, we've been in contact with the Australian organisers from that first one, and they have a goal to get some Pacific Island youth to attend that event, and that aligns perfectly with PIRT's goal of enhancing, the voice of Pacific youth in biodiversity decision making. So we're keen to look to support that next year, and also Biopalma. It aligns with their goal as well. So the Biopalma team under the Protected Areas Working Group of PIRT and PIRT Secretariat and Coordination Team are looking at, how we can get some youth there. And we would like to even look at inviting some of our other partners. If anyone has, even if it's just a small amount of money that they would be able to contribute to, sort of like a scholarship or, travel fund, we're hoping to, through PIRT and Biopalma, run a call for youth who would be interested in attending that event in September in Canada, to select them, and then that could be like a PIRT activity to support. So that's just something I was going to raise while waiting for Steph, and I can share some more information on email and have any conversations.
Yeah, I think we go to the awards. We just keep going.
Oh, Sefa.
Is he right?
So, hi, Sefa. Apologies, but we just sort of threw you in the deep end to invite you to speak while you're out. Just on PIRT, how we can enhance PIRT and PIRT's collaboration with UN agencies and other donors and partners. Would you be happy to speak now?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I
didn't realize I was on the agenda at the time. There was a fall, so.
No problem.
But I think the first point I'd want to make is for UN agencies. It's very difficult to become a member through a MOU or some formal process, because it's just you have to go through a whole thing up to headquarters and then come back. Most of the time you get turned down. So how I've managed ours is that through our MOU with Spread, because it has a broad cooperation and collaboration on things that align with MEAs and that kind of stuff. So that allows us to become a member. But I don't think you should be pressing UN agencies to go through the same process as the other, if you want them as members of because some of them may have those kinds of other cooperation agreements with different existing partnerships, but that may allow them to do what we've done. With the collaboration with global networks that work in a similar space, we just scope to work with those that exist in Asia through most of the UN agencies have regional offices in Bangkok. There's scope to do that. And then also with the global networks that are already exist. For example, the global program of action on land-based sources of pollution, those regional seas conventions that are already have been in place for over 40 years. Spread participates in that. So you could use that as a conduit for PIRT engagement. There are ways that exist, but you just have to be flexible and rather than just insisting on what you do, insist with NGOs or governments to become members, because it's just not possible. The other thing that we've tried to do through that meeting we had last week is to engage the technical people directly with the technical counterparts within UNEP, so that you don't only have the agency connection, but personal and same position type connection.
Yeah.
I think that's basically, we just do those two simple things and
Yes.
a long way towards
Yes.
strengthening things.
Spreading our influence and collaborating and trying to stop some of that duplication as well, Sefa. So thank you so much. That's wonderful. Yeah. So the next thing on the agenda.
One other thing.
Yes, go for it.
So we also have a joint thing with SPREP and the MEA secretariats for waste, on where we have a 6-monthly update.
Mm-hmm.
We have been talking about doing the same for the biodiversity MEAs.
Mm-hmm.
It's my fault. I haven't gone around to it. I'm trying to do that before I leave UNEP, so at least we can start that process.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Sefa. That's fantastic, and thank you for all the support and the dialogue that we're having. It's really very fruitful, and I can see lots of great ways for us to work together quite more closely. So now, Amanda and Stuart, can we hand over to you for the awards?
Yeah.
Thank
And I
you.
just thought, actually, apologies to my own SPREP team. Kossi, did you want to say something about COP26 in relation to, or we can share, otherwise we can share an update about the relevance of COP26 to biodiversity. We can share that in an email, or we could provide an update now.
We can do it both ways, but I guess in relation to the area of focus for the PIRT, the one key outcome that I think I was happy to see was the fact that there's now a work program for oceans, which is not happened before. And that means that we have a great opportunity within that framework of the UNFCCC to actually engage with partner stakeholders. I think that's a space that we need to have a look at it, because once something becomes part of the work program for COP, it means that every year the COP on the Secretariat especially needs to actually discuss it. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us, particularly the work that we do on marine climate change and biodiversity and so forth. I think that there's a massive opportunity there. So the details we can get from the spread by COP 2016 that are arriving next week, but will be encouraging. But I think we can send an email to elaborate it further. But for me, this is something that's been on COP radar for some years, and we never thought that would ever happen. So I think that we should be meeting and working together with not just our partners, but start looking at extending that our links in terms of expanding that work in the context of the UNFCCC.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kazi, very much. Can we go to the award now?
Yeah.
Well, just if I want to say something. Sorry, one thing. I was just showing Kosi update we were going to give to the diplomatic line for having on the 30th. So I'll share that with Jimmy, and she can. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. Excellent. Yeah, we can share that. Thanks, Sefa. That's great news. So, Stuart, we would love to hear from you. Lovely to see you. And the award ceremony, you're going to give us an update, and then we're going to play a video. And I understand the slides are in English, but the speaking is in French. And that video will go for around 20 minutes. And what we'd like to do after that is for everyone to try and get coffee, have a bit of a movement and break while the video is playing, to be back by 1:30. So I will hand over to
1:30 Australian time.
1:30 Australian time. Thank you.
45 minutes time.
Yeah. So I'll hand over. Well, we only need, I think, 25 minutes, though, don't we, Stuart? For the video, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as soon as we go into it, 25 minutes. So thank you, Stuart. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see everyone back together again for the PIRT meeting. So we have 35 participants online, which is great. So yes, we did the Pacific Island Environmental Leadership Awards again last year as part of the conference, although as we all know that got sidetracked, and we decided that we didn't want to have an event, that we wouldn't do it virtually at the conference. So we postponed actually holding the event until the SPREP meeting, and we held it in conjunction with the high-level session, the ministerial session at the SPREP meeting, and it was very successful. I hope that some of you were able to watch it when it happened, but if not, we're going to be showing the film shortly, video shortly of the awards. The award presentations. The categories, we had 5 categories: national leadership, community leadership, youth leadership, and region-wide environmental leadership. And the last category, Pacific Champion. Altogether, we gave out 14 awards, and they were given to a wide range of recipients who are doing great jobs in all the countries that the people were awarded in, and that included NGO organisations, youth groups, and individuals. and also people working in communities and remote areas. So we had one recipient from Kili conservation area in PNG, and another recipient working in the Andaman Islands in the Northern Solomon Islands. So it was a really good spread of very deserving people. The awards went to 7 countries, which were to people in 7 countries, which were Solomon groups, which were Solomon Islands, Fiji, New Caledonia, PNG, Vanuatu, Samoa, and French Polynesia. And so the other good part of it, of course, is that the recipients came not only from independent countries, but also from French territories. The Pacific Champion Award was given to the late Sue Tay, who all of you, certainly many of you would know, and a well-deserved award. It's just unfortunate that it had to be given posthumously. So I think that in a nutshell is the information about the Environment Leadership Awards. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them before we switch on the video.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Very exciting. Very, very good to see all the awards, and just the level of capacity that we're getting in the region. Is there any questions for Stuart? I don't think we have none in the chat room at the moment, Stuart. So while we're playing the video, if people do have questions, they can come back to you. So thanks, Stuart. So just to let everyone know, we're going to show the video. It goes for 20 minutes. If you could take it, watch it, but if you'd like to go and have a comfort break or a cup of tea, now's the time, because we're going to come back and then we're going to go to the working groups, and they're going to highlight just briefly what they've been doing over the last 12 months to us. So with further ado, would you like to?
So we're coming back in 25 minutes?
Back in 25 minutes, please.
I will. We have no sound. They hit the sound down below, it says no there.
Perhaps maybe 20 minutes or a bit more, is the second Pacific Islands Environment Leadership Awards. And these awards are the only Pacific region focused environmental awards that there are, and it was established in 2013 by SPREP. The awards recognize, promote, celebrate outstanding contributions of individuals, communities, non-governmental organizations, private enterprises, and countries and territories towards achieving an environmentally sustainable and resilient Pacific. The awards are given to outstanding achievement in the following thematic areas related to environmental sustainability in our 21 Pacific Island member countries. These include biodiversity and ecosystem protection, environmental governance, climate change adaptation and resilience, and waste management and pollution control. The categories awarded in the second Pacific Islands Environment Leadership Awards are National Leadership in Environmental Sustainability and Conservation by an Individual, Community Leadership in Environmental Sustainability and Conservation, Youth Leadership in Environmental Sustainability and Conservation, Lifetime Achievement, and Overall Champion of the Pacific. The celebration of the Pacific Environment Leadership Awards was originally planned to be held at the 10th Pacific Islands Conference on Nature Conservation and Protected Areas in New Caledonia of last year. This conference was postponed but then held virtually. We had hoped we could bring together the recipients of the awards to celebrate this at a live event. The global pandemic continued, and that brings us to today, where we will announce a total of 14 winners from across 7 countries as part of the high-level segment of the virtual 30th SPREP meeting. Chair and honorable members, I'd like now to introduce nominee of the Honourable Minister from New Caledonia, Mr. I'd like to introduce Mr. Charles Weir. Unfortunately, the Honourable Minister is not available to make the announcements. Mr. Charles Weir will be doing the needful on his behalf today. Mr. Weir is currently the advisor to the President of the New Caledonia Government. He is an elected official of the Loyalty Islands Province since 2009, and has worked in the Loyalty Islands Province and the New Caledonia Government from 2001 to 2014. He is a representative for New Caledonia at the Melanesian Spearhead Group for 15 years. I'd like now to call upon Mr. Charles Weir to make the announcements for the winners. Mr. Charles Weir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I would like also to take this opportunity to say hi to everybody. As you know that, as the Chair said, that the Minister will not be able to be here with us to announce the winners because we have actually a lockdown since 3 days now because of the COVID, and so I will be taking his responsibility to talk on his behalf, and also the President of the Government of New Caledonia. So, in relation with the subjects concerning the winners, so I'm going to talk in French, unfortunately, because I've got the paper here that has been prepared by my collègues. Bonjour à tous. Au nom du président du gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, je voudrais vous remercier de l'opportunité que vous offrez à la Nouvelle-Calédonie de remettre le prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement en tant que pays hôte de la 10e conférence du pays insulaire pour la conservation de la nature et des aires protégées qui a lieu en novembre 2020 à Nouméa. Cette deuxième édition du prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement met à l'honneur 14 lauréats qui contribuent ou ont contribué tout au long de leur carrière et ou à protéger l'environnement. En tant que maître de cérémonie de ce prix cette année, nous avons fabriqué les trophées par un jeune talentueux artiste sculpteur calédonien, Melem Tiaou, originaire d'Ouvia, qui a vendu ses premières sculptures à 6 ans. Toute sa famille, parents, frères et sœurs sont également sculpteurs. Sur ces statues, Melem, I've got here in front of you, if you can see the picture, représente la biodiversité totem du pays. Tout d'abord, le kagou représente les espèces endémiques et toutes les espèces en voie de disparition et leur capacité à s'adapter en fonction de leur environnement. La tortue représente la longévité. La raie est un symbole de voyage et les fleurs caractérisent la beauté de notre pays. Donc, nous allons maintenant procéder à la remise des prix. Les 14 lauréats du prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement sont repartis en 5 catégories. La première catégorie du prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement est le prix d'excellence du leadership national en matière de durabilité et de conservation de l'environnement, qui est décerné à 3 lauréats. Le premier lauréat est le docteur Patrick Picacha des îles Solomon. Le docteur Patrick Picacha est maître de conférences en écologie à l'École des sciences et des technologies de l'Université adventiste du Pacifique à Port-Moresby, en Papouasie-Nouvelle-Guinée. Il est auteur et co-auteur de plusieurs ouvrages richement illustrés, notamment Shore to Shore, Wildlife and Landscapes of Solomon Island, Wild West Rainforest of Western Solomon Island, et co-auteur de Fox of the Solomon Island et Solomon Island Forest Life. Il a également fondé le magazine Melanesian Geo, dédié depuis 15 ans à la diversité biologique et culturelle de la région mélanesienne. Pour le deuxième lauréat est attribué à M. Hubert Géraud de la Nouvelle-Calédonie. M. Géraud a débuté son engagement à WWF en 1992 en tant que co-volontaire pour la protection des tortues marines et le recensement des oiseaux pour un projet de site Ramsar en Guyane française. Il s'est ensuite installé en Nouvelle-Calédonie en 2001 pour participer à la création du bureau WW France, dont il est devenu le responsable en 2010. En 2002, il a reçu le prix de Jeune Espoir pour la conservation, pour le développement d'un projet de conservation ambitieux pour la tribu de Guapin en Nouvelle-Calédonie. Depuis avril 2001, il collabore avec WWF en Nouvelle-Calédonie en tant qu'expert de la conservation et du plaidoyer. Pour ce qui concerne la troisième lauréate, elle est attribuée à Madame Nunia Thomas Moko de Fidji. Elle est défenseuse passionnée de la conservation du patrimoine naturel des îles Fidji et de la durabilité environnementale. Nunia a réalisé plus de 40 évaluations de la diversité de l'ère pétophone, des habitats et des menaces aux îles Fidji. En 2007, Nunia a rejoint la nouvelle organisation Nature Fidji Marketivity, l'ONG nationale de conservation des Fidji. Elle a joué un rôle déterminant durant ses premières années de création et a été nommée directrice en 2013, poste qu'elle occupe toujours jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Donc, on félicite à tous les trois d'avoir gagné ces lauréats. La deuxième catégorie du prix Océania pour la protection de l'environnement est le prix d'excellence de leadership local en matière de durabilité et de conservation de l'environnement qui est décerné à 3 lauréats. Le premier lauréat est M. Timi Soang de la province de Nouvelle-Guinée. Après avoir été président de l'organisation de conservation communautaire YOUS, Timi a été pendant plus de 15 ans responsable de la conservation dans le cadre du protocole de conservation des kangourous arboricoles en province de Nouvelle-Guinée. Grâce à son action, Timi a réussi à sensibiliser un public large dans le cadre de l'organisation YOUS grâce à la diffusion du message d'éducation, la conservation et à mobiliser des milliers de citoyens pour une utilisation durable des ressources et pour la protection de l'environnement. La première zone de conservation reconnue au niveau national en Nouvelle-Guinée a ainsi été créée en 2009. Pour le deuxième lauréat est M. Henri Kanika des îles Solomon. Henri travaille avec les communautés dans le domaine de la conservation depuis 10 ans. Il a dirigé la création du parc marin communautaire d'Arnavon, qui a été déclaré premier parc national des îles Solomon en 2017 et a reçu la médaille d'or du Blue Park Award en 2019 par le Marine Conservation Institute en tant que parc marin hautement efficace. Henri a également cofondé l'association SIRA, Solomon Island Rangers Association, et le réseau des femmes Kawaki qui a permis au parc marin communautaire d'Arnavon d'intégrer la dimension des genres dans son travail de conservation. Et le troisième lauréat est Nature Fidji Marketivity de Fidji. Nature Fidji Marketivity of Fidji. Donc, Nature Fidji Marketivity est la seule ONG locale de Fidji qui œuvre exclusivement pour la conservation et la gestion durable du patrimoine unique de Fidji. Depuis 2007, cette ONG a mis en œuvre plus de 40 projets et obtenu plus de 5 millions de dollars fidjiens pour des actions de conservation des espèces, de gestion des espèces envahissantes ainsi que pour des zones protégées et la gestion durable des forêts. La mobilisation des communautés locales a permis la mise en œuvre de nombreuses initiatives de conservation réussies, notamment l'interdiction pour les communautés de capturer les chauves-souris menacées, la mobilisation pour la conservation de la forêt avec la mise en place des domaines forestiers permanents, l'élaboration des lignes directrices pour l'exploitation durable du palmier sagoutier et de nombreuses autres activités. Donc, félicitations à tous les trois. La troisième catégorie du prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement est le prix d'excellence du leadership des jeunes en matière de durabilité et de conservation de l'environnement qui est décerné à 4 lauréats, 4 winners. Le premier lauréat est la communauté d'Eracor Bridge, from Vanuatu. La communauté Eracor Bridge est située dans une zone périurbaine de Port-Vila. Peu de familles sont propriétaires de terrain. La diversité sociale, l'augmentation de la population, du chômage ont donné lieu à des conflits sociaux, à des problèmes de gestion des déchets et à la dégradation de l'environnement. L'initiative volontaire de la jeunesse des raccords a permis d'amorcer un changement social et environnemental positif. Les conflits sociaux diminuent, la population de poissons se régénère progressivement et des mangroves sont replantés. Il y a maintenant un sentiment d'unité et de fierté au sein de la communauté et un site d'échange utilisé pour brûler les déchets a été choisi pour construire un centre communautaire polyvalent par les jeunes des raccords Bridge. Le deuxième lauréat est M. Solomon Yo from Solomon Island. Solomon est un militant pour le climat et diplômé en droit et en sciences politiques à l'Université du Pacifique Sud depuis 2019. Cette même année, avec les étudiants de sa classe, il a lancé une campagne visant à persuader les dirigeants du Pacifique de faire progresser une résolution de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies demandant à la Cour internationale de justice un avis consultatif sur les changements climatiques et les droits de l'homme. Les étudiants ont ensuite fondé l'association Pacific Islands Students Fighting Climate Change, qui permet de faire avancer la campagne pour laquelle Solomon est aujourd'hui le directeur. Le troisième lauréat est le groupe de jeunes de Matautu, Lefanga, de Samoa. Matautu Youth Group de Lefanga est la seule organisation communautaire de l'île Lupolu qui offre aux jeunes des formations des projets de promouvant un environnement sain et des programmes de conservation et de gestion durable afin de réduire les impacts des changements climatiques. L'association possède une ferme biologique, permacole et durable. Les membres cultivent des légumes et des fruits biologiques pour garantir leur sécurité alimentaire et les vendre. L'association encourage également la conservation des océans et met en œuvre un projet de culture du corail dans leur zone marine protégée par la replantation de coraux. Et le quatrième lauréat de cette catégorie est l'association Calédocline de la Nouvelle-Calédonie. Calédocline est une association de jeunes qui promeut l'éco-citoyenneté dans le cadre des projets et d'actions écologiques participatifs. En ce temps, Calédocline a organisé plus de 300 opérations de nettoyage à travers la Nouvelle-Calédonie et collecté plus de 450 tonnes de déchets, dont au moins 350 tonnes ont été triées et envoyées au recyclage. Ils œuvrent également pour la revégétalisation et l'éradication des espèces invasives. Ils ont planté plus de 30 000 arbres pour restaurer leurs forêts et ont contribué à la conservation de la biodiversité ainsi que de nombreuses espèces endémiques présentes sur le territoire, dont certaines sont aujourd'hui menacées d'extinction. Je suis particulièrement fier de remettre ce prix à ce groupe bézier, fondateur de cette association. Donc, félicitations à tous les quatre. La quatrième catégorie du professionnel pour la protestation de l'environnement et le prix d'excellence pour l'ensemble de leurs réalisations dans leur leadership environnemental au sein du Pacifique est décerné à 3 lauréats. Le premier lauréat est le docteur Dick Wetling de Fidji, comme Fidji. Depuis près de 50 ans, Dick Wetling est connu pour son travail de pionnier, ses connaissances, son action et ses publications sur la faune et la flore des îles du Pacifique, la gestion des zones protégées, l'écologie des forêts et des mangroves, la gestion des espèces envahissantes, l'éducation à l'environnement, les études d'impact sur l'environnement et la gouvernance environnementale. Dick a publié des livres illustrés sur la nature pour les enfants, des guides et des travaux savants sur les oiseaux, les palmiers et les autres espèces sauvages des îles du Pacifique. Il a fondé Nature Fiji Mereketivity, l'ONG environnementale locale qui connaît un grand succès au Fidji, et est le mentor de nombreux jeunes environnementalistes reconnus dans la région. Le deuxième lauréat est monsieur madame Tusanile Fayo, le Sefatu Reti de Samoa. Depuis plus de 40 ans, Toussani contribue et joue un rôle déterminant dans l'avancement des programmes environnementaux et de conservation dans le Pacifique. Grâce à son développement et à son engagement, il a accompli des réalisations notables, notamment la création de l'Agence pour l'environnement et la conservation des Samoa, dont il a été le premier directeur en 1989. En 2000, il a dirigé le premier projet régional financé par le Fonds pour l'environnement mondial, qui a permis de créer 17 zones de conservation appartenant à des communautés dans la région des îles du Pacifique. Toussani joue un rôle clé dans la gestion des lames marines protégées de Savaï ou de celle du district de Lefanga au Samoa et continue à fournir des conseils d'experts et un soutien technique de nombreuses activités dans le domaine de l'environnement et de la conservation au Samoa. Et enfin, le troisième lauréat est M. Hassan Chang Aka, Jean Cap P de la Polynésie française. Jean Cap ou Jean Capé, comme on le surnomme, est une figure emblématique de la culture et de la conservation de la biodiversité en Polynésie française. Il est engagé bénévolement dans la préservation de la culture et de la nature depuis 1976, auprès de nombreuses associations culturelles et environnementales. En 2012, il a été décoré au titre de chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, la plus haute décoration honorifique française. En tant que monsieur bénévole, M. Chang préside les associations Tamariki Te Puka Maruya et Te Reo o Te Tuamotu et le directeur de l'académie Paumotu. Il est également membre actif d'une douzaine d'associations culturelles et environnementales. Il est par ailleurs membre actif de la Société d'ornithologie de Polynésie, dont il a été président pendant 5 ans et il est coordonnateur pour la région Pacifique du comité français de l'UICN. Donc, félicitations tous les trois. Et la dernière catégorie du prix océanien pour la protection de l'environnement est celui de championne de l'environnement dans le Pacifique, qui est décerné à Madame Sue Mila Tai de Samoa, en Nouvelle-Zélande, post-mortem pour toute une vie d'engagement en faveur de l'environnement. Je passe la parole à sa fille, Mademoiselle Gillian Tai.
Talofa lava o lo ingoa o Julian Faluseta e malo le soifua e mua ona si ilevi inga ili atua ona o lana tausinga o tātou whelua i ai male manuia le nei aso. Ave ia au e whai masui o le mātou ainga e momoli atu ai le mātou whaftai tele lava. I lo tō mamalu ona o le tō amana ia o le tina o le nei ainga whaftai tele lava. Talofa, I am Jillian Falusita, but most of you probably know me either as Sue or Falipo's daughter. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Honourable Chair and Honourable Ministers and everyone who is attending this event and say huge congratulations to all the winners. I have no doubt that each and every one of you are incredible in your fields and deserving of your awards. I would also like to say a huge whaftai tele lava to SPREP, not only for hosting this online event, but for hiring my mum way back in the 90s, because otherwise I truly wouldn't be here today. My mum and dad met at SPREP, and therefore I am also known as a SPREP baby. It's funny how these things come in full circle. My mum achieved many things in her life, and with these projects were incredible people beside her supporting her vision and vice versa, but I'll just name a few. In Samoa, she inspired the first marine protected areas. In Kiribati, she worked with President Tong in the creation of Phoenix Islands protected area. In the Cook Islands, my mum helped write the legislation for the creation of Marae Moana. And in Palau, she worked on the marine protection legislation. These are vast areas of the planet. My mum touched them all. My mum was the kind of person who would have suggested at least 5 other people who she thought were more deserving of the Pacific Champion Award. She believes in the Pacific leading the world in climate action, using our Pacifica knowledge, traditions, and values to navigate the solutions to climate change. This is still incredibly relevant today. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge my dad, Falipo's e Mama, who taught my mother the Samoan and Pacifica way, who taught her how Pacifica see their land and oceans within themselves and their cultures, how we are all connected. Without my dad, my mother wouldn't have been able to connect with Pacific leaders and communities the way that she did. And I truly believe that before any change that can be made, that kind of teaching is what the world needs so that we can fight all the challenges climate change brings. Whaftai tele lava for honouring my angel with such a prestige award, for reminding me and my family of her incredible work, and for keeping my mother's memory and legacy alive in the Pacific. Whaftai tele lava.
Merci. Thank you, Jilan, from this word. Thank you, Jilan, from this word from you, ma'am. On est arrivé au terme de cette cérémonie de remise de récompenses. Je remercie de nouveau tous les lauréats pour vos engagements dans la protection de l'environnement du Pacifique. Je tiens également à remercier l'ensemble des invités à cette deuxième édition de remise des prix océaniens pour la protection de l'environnement des îles du Pacifique. À tous pour votre augmentation, je passe la parole à M. Kosi Latou. And also would like to say thank you very much. Lava, Uleti, God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles Weir, for taking the time to make those announcements. And can I say that we want to also from here congratulate all of the winners who are worthy of as recipients. So thank you very much for also the Honourable Minister and the Government of New Caledonia who hosted this conference where these leadership awards are a part of. And just wanted to say that the beautiful trophies that you are seeing being held up are currently in New Caledonia, and SPREP will be organizing to send them to the winners very shortly. So we invite the countries of the winners to celebrate with the winners locally through their own ceremonies, media stories, and other activities. So thank you very much to the Government of New Caledonia, and through you, Mr. Charles Weir, please convey our gratitude to the Honourable Minister and the President and the people of New Caledonia for hosting such a wonderful conference last year and continuing the momentum right up to these awards today. Thank you very much.
Very much.
I want to finish up by saying that the next round of the Pacific Environment Leadership Awards will be in 2025. This will be, of course, aligned to the 11th Pacific Islands Conference on Nature Conservation in Protected Areas. We encourage you to submit nominations for these prestigious awards when the next round is announced in a couple of years. To learn more about each of these Pacific Champions and Awards, you can visit the SPREP website.
Okay, yeah. Right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much. Wonderful video, and I certainly had a tear in my eye or two as we went through those. So thank you, Stuart, so much for hosting that with SPREP. Such an important part of who we are as PIRT, and with COVID, we did struggle with that, and so I think Stuart and SPREP did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. So the next part of our agenda is the update from the PIRT chairs on the working group's report, and I'd like to hand over to the protected areas as the first group. Vi, can I ask you to start the ball rolling? We can't.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, we'll just be providing a brief report from the protected area working group. And just to let you know that the report will be in two parts. I will be presenting the first part, and my colleague and co-chair of the protected area working group, Paul Van Lindbergen, of IUCN, will be delivering the second part. So I think that, the full meeting of the working group was held around the margins of the IUCN Oceania Regional Conservation Forum, which was on the 29th of July, 2019. The meeting was well attended. We had about just over 20 participants representing various member partner organizations. The key outcomes of that meeting mainly revolved around discussions dealing with preparations, input, and contributions to the 10th Pacific Islands Conference on Conservation of Protected Areas, which is going to be the last year, as well as the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In relation to the discussions on the post-2020 GBF, some of the outcomes of discussions revolved around the need to have targets focused on one, socioeconomic and enabling conditions for successful protected areas, and two, integrated landscape management. There was also discussion on the need to have quantifiable targets around management effectiveness and protected area governance, as well as linking sustainable finance to protected area targets. There was also discussion on reinvigorating discourse and discussion on public-private partnerships in the context of protected areas, and also on the need to adequately recognize conservation leadership and success models from the region through other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECMs. Related to the discussion on the conference, what the working group was really focusing on was to explore opportunities for tangible and meaningful engagement during the conference. And the result of this was 2 protected area tracks or sessions focusing on both terrestrial and marine. And this is perhaps the biggest milestone for the protected area working group this year. I think the MPA session attracted over 500 live views, making it the second most viewed session of the conference, opening session. So quite proud about that. As well, there were some good case studies and discussions that came out of the session. During the meeting in 2019, the working group was also invited to consider a number of concept proposals dealing with the establishment of regional system of protected heritage areas, as well as the establishment of a task force for protected area management forces in the Pacific. The meeting also noted progress updates in SPREP and IUCN on the development of the Conserving Our Islands, our Sea of Islands, State of Protected and Conserved Areas in Oceania report, as well as related activities of the Regional Protected Areas Decision Support Hub here at SPREP. Some issues and challenges that we faced over the last year, I think really was the lack of face-to-face engagement, largely due to COVID-19 restrictions and the prevention of travel in that regard. As well, we didn't have no set frequency of meetings for the working group. There was also has been infrequent communication from members of our mailing list, but we continue to put up notifications and encourage greater discussion and interaction through that mechanism. There's also been a difficulty of compiling updates across the working group for various meetings of that we've had over the past year. And I think one of the other bigger things is that the current work plan of the working group is a bit too busy. There's too much information in there, and it's made it a bit hard to track and monitor and evaluate the progress or any sort of to see where we've made the impact over the past years. So I'll leave it there, and I'll hand it over to my colleague Paul Van Linden from IUCN to present our update on the second part of the report. Thank you.
Hi, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to continue on from Vi. I guess from a chair's perspective, with these challenges in mind, we do think that there's a real opportunity to enhance and mobilize the membership of the PORG to make a greater impact in the next 5 years. Particularly in light of the new framework, which will provide a really great platform for doing that. Some of the ideas and actions that we have in mind that we would like to implement going forward. We think that there's an opportunity to refocus the role and purpose and the objective of the working group, particularly around becoming more active, a more active forum for coordination, collaboration and communication. As Vi noted before, There have been some issues about how active the group is, so we really want to make it more active and enhance those elements. One example of this is what Amanda touched on earlier, which is the collaboration around trying to sponsor some young people from the region to attend the International Marine Protected Area Congress in Vancouver, which is September next year. The committee for the first Congress, which was held in Geelong, I guess a few years ago, they've got 8,000 Australian dollars available. It'd be great if some of the PIRT members could, as a collaboration, could chip in some money as well. It'd be fantastic if we could match that. And that would mean that we could send a delegation of maybe 3, 4 or something, people like that. As we know, the Pacific makes a really disproportionate contribution to marine conservation. So it'd be, I think it's really important that there is a Pacific voice at that event. All right, so next, moving on, we'd like to have a regular schedule of meetings. This hasn't been the case in the last year. So we think it would be worthwhile to have, to plan for and to have 3 monthly or quarterly meetings. We would also like to initiate dialogue within the PORG around potentially rebranding it. It probably operates and should operate more as a network rather than a working group. So I think it's particularly in our next meeting, I think it's important to discuss that among the members, have some dialogue around what we think the focus is, what it should look like. The next one is, I guess this is for the whole PIRT, but also for the PORG, is really examine the membership and whether there's a need to reinvigorate it. So our idea around this was to actually, similar to the IUCN commissions, get people to renominate every 5 years. Really simple process, but getting everyone to reaffirm their commitment to the working group, but also try to attract a broader membership, potentially organisations outside the PIRT, more people from the countries themselves rather than regional organisations. We'd also like to encourage increased engagement and people basically volunteering their time. That would be an expectation of becoming a member of the PORG, is that you should provide, whether it's through your professional job or otherwise, that you're able to provide some time to support the work and the collaboration of PORG. As Vi touched on before, we'd also like to examine the work plan. It is pretty long and bulky. So maybe we need to, in the interest of efficiency and using our time targeted towards the most important priorities, maybe we could make that a little bit shorter. And lastly, but certainly not least, is we'd like to strengthen the role of the working group in relation to the Pacific Islands Protected Area Portal, PIPA, as I'm sure you all know. This is really I think globally, one of the premium platforms for protected areas. In the last 4 years, there's been over 100,000 different users of that platform. It really does provide a significant contribution to protected areas in the region. Potential that role or enhanced role could be supporting Vi a little bit more in his role, to providing resources, but also helping out with making sure it continues. The current funding will finish in 2023. I think there should be a commitment to support that as well. So I'll wrap up there. The last thought that we had is probably a need for greater engagement with the PIRT Secretariat, and particularly how we can work together to progress the objectives and actions in the framework. So thank you. Back to you, Margaret and Amanda.
Thank you, Paul and Vi. That was outstanding, and as you say, some exciting progress there in your report. Fantastic, but completely agree. with you, Paul, on how we become much more dynamic and impactful and effective. So yeah, thank you to the Protected Areas Working Group. We're very thrilled at that update. Thank you. The next group we're going on to is the Pacific Environmental Law Working Group. And BJ Kim, can I invite you, please? Thank you. Great to have you here.
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Amanda, and thank you to the organisers of this meeting.
Oh, we've lost you, but you've
Sorry.
muted yourself.
Sorry, it's great to see some old and new faces. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional people of the land from which I am joining you, the Larrakia people. I'm incredibly lucky to be here in Darwin, in the Northern Territory, on Larrakia land, where we haven't had much community transmission of COVID cases. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of and elders and past and present of the lands from where you join this meeting.
Thank you.
As an environmental law NGO, I did want to just start off by saying how valuable this forum is and the space that PIRT creates. It's an excellent space to build partnerships and relationships with other environmental law NGOs, but also other environmental NGOs, but in particular to build relationships with decision makers and key people in government. Often we have as an environmental law organization, a mixed relationship with government because we're suing them sometimes, but it's really important that we have a good relationship and we're able to develop those relationships for positive outcomes for the environment. And PIRT is a space that we can do that in. So thank you all for continuing to create space. I should note, I am a bit of a ring-in for this meeting. And I only have a very brief presentation because Maria Movesi, who is the chair, couldn't be with us today. I should have mentioned that I'm the International Program Manager at the Environmental Defenders Office, and I am the Secretary of the Environmental Law Working Group, which we refer to as panel. It's the Pacific Network for Environmental Law. So we're pretty proud of that acronym. And please excuse me for facing away from the screen at times while I check my notes. Just so that you know, panel was established at the PIRT Annual Meeting in 2015. It is a network of organizations and individuals with an interest in protecting the environment by strengthening systems, institutions, organizations, and individuals concerned with environmental law in the Pacific region. With the developments at PIRT, I think it's probably opportune for us to review our aims, but that's where we started. Key members of panel include IUCN, SPREP, and the Environmental Law Associations across the region, Fiji Environmental Law Association, the Solomon Islands Environmental Law Association, and the Vanuatu Environmental Law Association, and a whole range of individual and sort of organization members. I was going to break down this update into three brief areas: key challenges, successes, and activities. The key challenge, I think, perhaps that all PIRT working group space is keeping up the momentum, and that's a challenge for panel. We had a meeting in 2020 where we had a bit of a sort of existential crisis about, whether it's worth continuing on, given that it's been difficult to keep everybody together and meeting. And actually at the time, I think it was Nick Barnes from Fiji, said, look, we don't have to be so stressed about all of this. This is a great forum. You know, we can dip in and out when we need to, but we don't have to be too worried about making sure we're meeting, you know, every month or quarterly, because nobody needs more meetings than they need. So that was quite reassuring. And I think those comments feed in well to our huge success in the past year. And that was the IUCN inaugural Environmental Law Conference, where panel members, sometimes dormant in the panel forum, stepped up and we all came together. Panel officially supported the event. The event was supported by a range of other organizations, and it was a resounding success. I believe there were several hundred and maybe over 1,000 participants. In one session I joined, I think I saw about 800 people attending.
Wow.
All across the world. And so that was a huge shot in the arm for panel and for environmental law in the Pacific. And so, you know, really something that we can be proud of, and especially Maria and the team at IUCN who were involved in organizing the event. It was a huge undertaking, and they did an incredible job, and supported by panel members. I have, there is an outcome statement from the conference, and I will post a link in the chat to the link to the conference website. But I felt, I was in a session with Leba Halofaki Matatini, excuse the pronunciation, who is I understand, a stalwart environmentalist in Fiji. Some of you may know her. I believe she's also an educator. She's in her 70s, and she was so thrilled with the conference. And she said that she was part of the South Pacific Action Committee on Human Ecology and Environment. And she said it worked as a clearinghouse for SPREP many, many years ago. I'm not sure when that group was formed, but I love the name, the South Pacific Action Committee on Human Ecology and Environment. And she said that she started that work many years ago, and she felt that the conference was a culmination of that work. And being in her 70s, she can now rest easy knowing that you know, the next generation of environmental advocates and environmental lawyers are capable of creating change from her experience from the conference. So I thought that was a really touching comment.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think the outcome statement is quite comprehensive, and I encourage you all to look at that statement. But I did want to just draw out just a simple comment, really, that Leba made, simple but profound, in that she felt that the key work of environmental lawyers in the Pacific was to support resource owners to be the frontline protectors of their resources. And I think, again, something, you know, worth reflecting on, and certainly something that we're all trying to do. And you know, IUCN and SPREP and EDO and CELCOR and all the environmental law associations and the members of panel are working day to day to do this, and often so hard that we forget to meet, but something to definitely you know, focus on. So that was a key success. In terms of activities, I'll just be very brief. Maria provided me with an update on the work of the IUCN. Key work that she and her team are engaged in is a grant from PIFS under the UN grants program that's focused on environmental law initiatives in Vanuatu, Fiji and the Solomons. They are also working on a publication for judges and lawyers relating to environmental and climate change laws. They're also working with UNEP and ADB on following up on some of the outcomes of the conference, including a range of sort of education initiatives for judges across the Pacific. ICN also established an environmental law brown bag lunch series. And the first webinar was held in February 2021, and the series will recommence in 2022. I understand that FELA is continuing on with its work in the marine space and will be finalising a policy paper on developing MPA legislation. I understand Ciela and Vela are working on outreach projects and also fielding issues related to logging and mining from their communities. Cellcore and EDO are doing some substantial work in PNG. So Cellcore being the Centre for Environmental Law and Community Rights, they're the leading public interest environmental law organisation in PNG. And we are working together with Cellcore on some significant work that we're really excited about that was raised in the conference, including protecting the Pacific River, which we understand as in a sense, the Amazon of the Pacific region and a treasure for the region, which is under threat from one of the world's biggest mines. It's the Freda River Gold Mine. It's at the head of the Pacific River. It's currently proposed to have a tailings dam that's 2.5 the size of, for Australian-minded people, the size of Sydney Harbour. The tailings need to be submerged underwater in the tailings dam for eternity, otherwise it will be active. And it's in a seismically active area, in an area prone to high rainfall. So it's a disaster waiting to happen. And so we're working on that project with Cellcore. And in addition to that, as part of protecting the Pacific River, a really exciting rights of nature strategy for the Pacific River. And that's recognizing the rights of the Pacific River as local and traditional custodians of that river recognize it. We have a range of mining and logging projects. As you all know, PNG is really at risk of significant deforestation. Well, it has undergone significant deforestation, as has many other parts of the Pacific. And it's a huge threat for communities and biodiversity. And we're working with Cellcore and the communities on a range of mining and logging cases. Deep seabed mining is obviously a concern, and Saltwater One, what was to be the world's first commercial deep seabed mine, is still not completely dead in the water, excusing the pun. And so it's something that we're still working on. Mayer Resources, an Australian company, is looking to develop PNG's first coal mine with a power station in Lae, which is a huge concern. And that's something that we're working in partnership with Cellcore to stop. And obviously the most significant threat to Pacific communities, global heating, climate change, and we're looking at some initiatives and cases on that front as well. So that's the end of my presentation.
Outstanding presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We've got chat pieces in the side there. Again, I think we'll take that forward and come back to you after this meeting. to keep the flow going. But congratulate you and all who had the law conference this year. Reconnecting is so important, and as we go into 2022, I think reinvigorating ourselves and seeing and looking back at the great work that we're doing is always a very positive and important thing for us all to do. Sometimes we don't think we're doing well enough, but yes, that was a really good point. Thanks, BJ. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and as we just said, those in the chat, we will get back to you about that. Thank you. Now I'd like to go and hand to the wonderful Junie. The species working group have been working really hard, but Mark O'Brien, who has a very booming voice, is in Scotland. And although it is a booming voice, he's unable to boom all the way down to the Pacific. I spoke to him this morning and he sends his regards with his beanie on and his jumper, and he's not enjoying being cold at all. Karen Baird is also was going to be part of this, but she's had to get her next COVID jab, so she's had to leave the meeting, and Helen is unable to be here. So Junie and I have worked together to put this update. We're just going to quickly go through it. If there are any questions, we will send it back to the group. So Junie, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, and good afternoon, everyone. As Margaret had mentioned, all the chairs are currently unavailable, so I'll be presenting their updates on behalf of the three of them. So the species working group currently has 80 members listed in their Google group mail list, and the purpose of setting up that Google mail list was to promote the technical exchange and knowledge, facilitate networking, and increase collaboration efforts in species conservation across the Pacific region. Next, Amanda. So just to highlight some of the activities and outputs that happened in 2021, there were a few conferences, meetings, and trainings that occurred. The first one was the first Pacific Islands Bat Forum. This was an online conference, and this was led by the Australasian Bat Society in collaboration with SPREP and other individual members and partners such as BirdLife International. Other meetings led by BirdLife International is the KBA reassessment to revalidate KBAs in Melanesia, and SPREP in collaboration with CMS Pacific Cetacean Signatories, NGOs, and community groups and experts held the fourth meeting of the Pacific Cetacean MOU to provide an update of activities that have been occurring over the past year since the last MOU meeting occurred. And Karen again worked with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Samoa and Samoa Conservation Society to convene a training workshop on seabird monitoring techniques and survey designs. So we have very interesting surveys that are happening this year and are ongoing. So just to list a few, we've got a biodiversity survey happening in Vanuatu, and this is led by BirdLife International in collaboration with the Vanuatu Environmental Science Society, EcoLife Livelihood Development Associates, and this is carrying out rapid assessments in Tafea and SAMN areas. BirdLife International is also avifauna in the Federated States of Micronesia, using Sami quotas to monitor the occurrence of bird species across each of the states and comparing these studies to the 1980 studies that has occurred. The Vanuatu Environmental Science Society is also carrying out their field work, looking at the threatened and endemic flying foxes. Next, Amanda, please. We also have Oceania, the ecology group, carrying out surveys, looking at the giant rats in Solomon Islands and working with the communities to develop or explore best management options to protect these species and their habitats. We also have surveys done by the University of Queensland, also looking at the terrestrial mammals on Manus Island, and also try to develop species recovery plans for the species as well. In Vanuatu, we have the Vanuatu Environmental Science Society looking at identifying critical habitats for the Fiji mastiff bat and also the Banks flying foxes, and also working towards developing national action plans for these bat species. The species working group has also worked with partners to develop management and action plans. And here's an example of the Vanuatu Environmental Science Society working on developing policies and management plan for the protection of dugongs in Vanuatu. We have Nature Fiji working with BirdLife International, Griffith University, and IUCN to also carry out their star analysis using IUCN red list to assess the threat abatement and restoration scores for biodiversity in Fiji. And lastly, we had Karen work with a lot of our SPREP members and partners to review the regional marine species action plan, where we have 5 key action plans that were developed, one for dugongs, sharks and rays, cetaceans, turtles, and lastly seabird. We also, there are also currently projects that are being implemented, and here's an example of the Bycatch Integrated Ecosystems Management Initiative, or the VEM project that is currently managed by SPREP, with funding through the Pacific EU Marine Partnership, and this focuses on the bycatch in the region, and they have also implemented activities such as reviewing and publishing the status of sea turtles in the Pacific. They've also assisted national countries who are party societies to develop non-detriment findings for CITES listed species such as corals, sharks and rays, and giant clams. Under this project, they have also been carrying out turtle surveys and working with countries to develop national plans for sharks and rays as well as seabirds. And they're also currently working with Vanuatu government to carry out a study on the wedge-tailed shearwater seabird harvesting. Yeah, looking at the harvesting of the seabird in Vanuatu. And lastly, there is also a Pacific cetacean diversity and threats report that is being reviewed and updated, and this will be published later on this year. And lastly, the Regional Turtle Research and Monitoring Database System, or TREDS, is currently being upgraded and into a web-based system to make it easier for the countries to report on stranding turtles, turtles that are coming out to nest, or foraging turtles, surveys that are being held in their feeding areas. And this work is undertaken by SPREP, funded by Fond Pacific and the VEM project as well. And that's all the highlights and updates from the species working group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Junie. Karen was listening on her mobile, so I hope that Junie and I have done a good job, Karen, if you can hear us, on capturing all the great work that the species coordination group has done. So thank you. Next on the agenda is the Pacific Invasive Partners. Ray, Nias, are you able to now present?
Yes.
Here, Ray.
Let me know if you want me to share, Ray. Otherwise,
do you mind running the slides for me? I think there's only 4 of them.
Yep, easy.
Thanks. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Margaret and the Secretariat for this meeting. It's great to see PIRT getting those resources in addition to, and I think it's a great step forward. Certainly, PIP really supports the way that PIRT is going, and we look forward to being a contributor. PIP is the Pacific Invasives Partnership. We are, like the other working groups, a voluntary network of people engaged in invasive species management issues in the region. And PIP has a strategy that we update every year. It has 3 major strands, high-level engagement with things like CBD and so forth. Regional efforts such as funding, strategies, and so on. Raising the profile of invasive species in the region. And every now and then, we also usually have an ongoing sort of major project focus, pushing a particular issue or some sort of concern. And for example, in the last few years, ants have been very much on the top of the agenda for PIP in terms of trying to get greater interest and action and attention towards the problem of invasive ants in the Pacific Islands. I thought I'd just show you this list because this is a list of people who turned up at our last meeting, obviously by Zoom, of course. And I think one of the upsides of Zoom is that it does allow a lot of people to participate in meetings that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to travel or have the time or availability to undertake regional travel. And as you see, we have quite a diverse group geographically. We have people from New Zealand, Australia, the US, as well as some Pacific Island representation. I would say that we probably have at least twice this number of people on our list server. So it's quite a good group. Mm. Unfortunately, I think that the main problem, if you're looking at a list like this, is that we tend to lack Pacific Island representation. And to some extent, that's understandable. Many Pacific Islander invasives people are 120% occupied doing their day job and don't have time to be part of this quite often. But also, I guess, the major focus of the PIP is actually quite high level. And it usually, so we're actually talking about regional strategy and international efforts and so on. So we do have a separate group called the Pacific Invasives Learning Network, which really does focus much more on the in-country, on-ground practitioner group in the Pacific Islands. And that's PILN, is a sort of sister organisation to PIP. It was established at the same time and is also managed through SPRET. Mm. So so we had this sort of neat arrangement where we have a high-level PIP and we have the on-ground practitioner management group in PILN.
Excellent.
So at each of our meetings, we quite often have a major focus for the meeting. And the last one was about, we were fortunate to get Tristan Armstrong, who's a senior advisor from the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia, to give us a briefing on Australia's proposed Pacific biosecurity strategy. This is something, in fact, that PIP members have been advocating for quite a while now. And so we do pat ourselves at least a little on the back, thinking that we've helped push it along. So the Australians, as you can see there, are investigating a regional strategy. It involves quarantine, customs, invasive species issues generally. The department wants to be a regional broker. It has bilateral funding for biosecurity, but it is interested and would look at other areas other than just biosecurity for investment. They want to get involved in capacity building and technical matters, surveillance, capacity building within government agencies, research on way to combat critical threats, etc., and becoming part of a broader network around biosecurity. Australia is currently in discussion with PNG, Solomons, Fiji and others on this matter, particularly in relation to rural industries and livelihoods. And it's still early days, so we don't yet know exactly where that investment is going to be, but it's not unusual, and it's quite accepted actually in the region that Australia tends to focus on the Melanesian countries to our immediate north in terms of these sorts of initiatives. The department's also closely liaising with New Zealand agencies, which is good and something we also have stressed to them on a number of occasions. And of course, the Pacific regional agencies such as SPREP and SPC are critical partners. So in terms of our work for the last year, really the PRISM's members have been very much very heavily engaged in the implementation of the SPREP GEF 6 funded program PRISMs. It's been a big thing for most of our members over the last year. And for those who are not familiar with the acronym, which I can take some blame for, is the Pacific Regional Invasive Species Management Support Service. And it's run by David Mobley and his group, together with a series of partners who manage and help run the programs that are attached to under the PRISMs. Lately, one of the major focuses in PIP has been helping to develop the strategy and action plans for PRISMs. For example, two of the action plans are Predator Free Pacific, which focuses on the removal of mammalian predators, much in the same way as New Zealand has its Predator Free New Zealand. And also the program on resilient ecosystems, resilient communities, which is a program focused very much on controlling and managing and mitigating invasive species impacts on important indigenous ecosystems, native ecosystems, and agricultural ecosystems. So we're working on those at the moment, and what you see there is essentially just a late draft of the strategy for PRISMs itself, the long-term vision, healthy and resilient Pacific communities and indigenous ecosystems where the threat of invasive species is mitigated. And we have a number of principles that will underpin that. Thanks. I just want to mention two other things that was being very much on the agenda for us in PIP and PRISMs. One is mainstreaming invasive species in the region. We are trying to get invasive species adopted by all the relevant sectors, trade, health, not just environment, infrastructure, etc. And of course, we are also involved in a review of the invasive species management guidelines that was published many years ago. There's been a very successful document, and we're revising that as part of this process. So a very active year and very much focused on implementing major pieces of work. And last slide, thanks. I didn't have time to think this through very much, but what's ahead of 2022? But I think we're still going to be implementing PRISMs in a big way. But at least there's one thing that I'm aware of that could be of interest, and it's the second Australian Biosecurity Symposium, which was supposed to happen last year. Yeah. And again, this will be an opportunity, I think, for us very much to encourage and welcome Australia's greater regional engagement on biosecurity issues in the Pacific. So thank you very much. We are very pleased to be an active and influential part of the PIRT team.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Outstanding work, and as you say, some amazing opportunities, I think, in 2022 to take so much of that work forward. So thank you very much. The next and last of the working groups is Nature and Culture, and Mason, I understand we're going to throw to you, if that's okay. Can we hear you, Mason? We can't hear Mason.
Good afternoon, Margaret. Can you hear me?
Hola, yes, we can hear you, Mason, loud and clear. Hello.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure joining you from Suva, Fiji.
Yes.
This afternoon, Elise and I will tag team the feedback session on the Nature Culture Working Group. Colleagues, for those of you who were in the loop, you would recall that a few months ago, a concept idea was floated around the region, providing the rationale for the establishment of a nature culture working group that would fit under PIRT. Based on the feedback we got, we were encouraged to draft a terms of reference using the format that was used for the establishment of the other PIRT working groups. And this was sent to SPREP PIRT Secretariat for their review and onward transmission for review by PIRT members. I am thankful this morning or this afternoon to have read the endorsement by the heads of organizations on the establishment of the Nature Culture Working Group within PIRT. As you would have also known, there was a suggestion from the Pacific Oceans Alliance sitting out of the Oceans Commission's office for a similar working group. But after discussions with a number of stakeholders, it was decided that perhaps it would be better for the working groups to remain separate. However, it was agreed that we would invite the representatives of the Pacific Oceans Alliance working group to be part of the Nature Culture Working Group under PIRT. So with that, we also started looking at potential members of the working group. And I'd just like to thank Elise for being volunteered to be the interim chairperson of the Nature Culture Working Group, and she will be speaking shortly after this. We've also looked around and picked up advice from stakeholders regarding the other members. And as I mentioned, the PIFs will be represented in the working group. We're also looking at Ms. Melania Nawandra of PIFs and also Dr. Francis of SPC as potential members of the working group. IUCN will be represented by one of our cultural experts to assist the interim chair. And we'd like to invite other members of PIRT who have expertise in this area to come on board and assist with the establishment of the working group members. And perhaps the next stage from that is to, once the members are confirmed, to have an inception meeting and then have a work plan that is to be drafted and sent back to the PIRT Secretariat for approval so we can get on with the work that needs to be done. With that, Margaret, I'll hand over now to the interim chair. Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Excellent.
Naka Mason, and good afternoon to all. Bulavi Naka. Okay, well, I guess I've been kind of put on the spot. I also hope that you can hear me because I'm at home and my internet connection is sometimes a bit weak.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Mason, for your words of introduction about the new working group. I just wanted to give a bit of background about how we got here. We did in collaboration with SPREP. Well, sorry, I'll just backtrack a bit. I'm the vice chair of the Commission on Environment, Economic and Social Policy. And one of the things for Oceania, and one of the things I've been working on is sort of connecting culture, nature, conservation, development, indigenous peoples' rights, and so forth. So as background, we did a culture audit of the action plan, which was the predecessor to the frameworks. And so the audit sort of fed into the last, the previous framework to the current one. So this has been sort of ongoing work around having better integration of cultural values. So that's how we got to the stage that we're at. And one of the things that's been really important to develop, I think, are tools to really look at how to bring cultural values, cultural expressions, cultural heritage values together with natural heritage values, and particularly with conservation work. So I think one of the objectives of the working group will be really important will be to develop those tools, guidelines. There's some existing international guidelines, but we also really need to look at what works in our region and how to push for that. So also there's a lot of research, there's a lot of work happening, but it's very dispersed. And one of the objectives of the working group will be to bring that research together. I'm thinking, for instance, of Randy, who I've seen has now joined us, who's working on a book on frigate birds in Nauru, and obviously frigate birds have huge cultural value. So how do we look at those cultural values and then integrate them into conservation programs and policy? At the international level, there's already connections. There's the Ramsar Culture Network that's been very active. So I think it'll be really good for this working group to connect with that one. And of course, the IUCN Nature Culture Initiative, which began with the Nature Culture Journey and is now going into a new phase at IUCN. So those are some of the key areas. I also think it's really important for this group to have crossover with some of the other groups, protected areas in particular. We know that there's around management of protected areas, around management of World Heritage sites, where there tends to be approaches for natural heritage, which are separate from cultural heritage, when actually people living in these areas don't make those distinctions. So it's really important to look at how to bridge those gaps, which are sort of technocratic or administrative and sometimes political directions that need to be relooked at. With environmental law, for instance, the emphasis on EIAs in the regions. PREP did a lot of work on EIAs. There's very little focus on cultural impact assessments as part of those EIAs or alongside those EIAs, and these are really important factors for the region because, again, people are living in that environment. They imagine that environment, they live that environment on a daily basis, and they express that in cultural ways. Yeah, and then for the species working group, also I just mentioned frigate birds, but I was able to sit in on some of the workshops for the action plan on migratory species, marine migratory species that PREP and Karen's team organized. And again, there's really a lot of crossover there. Back to law, the rights of nature, the other work that's been done on rights of nature across the world has been actually based on cultural values and ways of seeing the world. So I think there really is a lot of crossover, and I hope that that this group can work closely with the other groups and working groups in some of these areas. So I think I'll leave it at that. for now and pass it back to the chair. Naka.
Thank you so much, Elise, and thank you so much for Mason and Elise in your leadership in bringing this new group forward. I think one of the most important and critical as we go forward. So thank you for that leadership, and we welcome you officially to the family, the PIRT family. And as you say, we'll be having the chairs working together more next year as we look at those cross-regional opportunities as well as cross different areas of the working groups coming together to look at those commonalities. So thank you, Elise. That's wonderful. So that's the end of our working groups. I think we all feel excited and a little bit tired after that. There's a lot of work going on, and congratulations to you all. It's been a fantastic year, a difficult year, as we said. So the next thing on the agenda, we're getting close to the end, everyone, is just quickly to report. As we said, we're usually together, but because of the situation of COVID, we had a virtual heads of organisation meeting and put forward the critical areas that we needed confirmed. And I'd like to just quickly report back to you on those. So very excited to say that we have endorsed the new implementation and monitoring plan. Thank you, James. A huge milestone for us. We've endorsed the establishment of a new working group under PIRT that we just heard of, Nature Culture Working Group. Again, a warm welcome to the family. We're thrilled that you're here. We know that the PIRT working plan of 2021-22 is available, and we had that spoken to earlier on today. So thank you again, James, for that. And a future discussion will be held on the PIRT membership and categories and criteria, exactly what Paul and a number of people have spoken about. You know, I think this is a critical new area for us to really concentrate over the next 12 months. So I'm very pleased to report that back to you. And again, I thank all the heads of the organisations for all your support and getting all those back to us as quickly as you have. Thank you so much. Okay. So I don't think, do we have to do any, we're just endorsing that. Yeah, that's all there is to it, I think.
We have any final comments.
So well done, Mason. Well done, Elise. We're very thrilled. Thank you. Okay, so next is just did you want to put out the work plan? I don't think we need to do that, do
No,
we?
no. I think we just...
Okay. No, I think that's it. I'm just going to come up with the closing remarks now, because I think thank you, Randy. We saw your wonderful chat as well. Thank you so much. So I'd like to just say a huge thank you to the Secretariat, in particular to Stuart and to Amanda and Junie. We are grateful for all the hard work that both of you, and all the three of you, sorry, do throughout the year. You know, it's an enormous amount of work behind the scenes to keep this going, and we're very grateful. And to James Tremlett as well, who's worked tirelessly beside us and become part of the team and family very quickly. And I think we all see how outstanding his contribution has been, and also to UNEP for that opportunity. And our thanks goes to all the working groups, their hard work in supporting the nature and the people of the Pacific. We're grateful. But I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Cozy for all his hard work and leadership. He's not there that I can see, so glad we're recording this. Thank you, Cozy. We wish you and your family every success and joy for your new journey going forward. And also a warm welcome to Sefa as he takes up his new role as Director General in April next year. And we very much look forward to working with you, Sefa, in 2022 as well. And with that, I am calling the closing of the 2021 Pacific Island Roundtable AGM, and we very much look forward to you coming together again in 2022 and working with you. We wish you and your families a wonderful holiday break, well rested and well-deserved break. I'd just like to encourage all of us to turn our computers on now, because the technology, we haven't had one hiccup, so we can turn it on and we can all wave and say thank you and hi to each other. And yeah, thank you for all the hard work, and I wish you all the best. So if everyone can get their cameras on, that'd be.
I'm going to try capture this.
Yay, bye.
Okay, wait up, everyone smile.
Oh,
nearly all ready. Okay, smile. Done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.